Welcome to my video on special senses and the end of the quarter, showing my mask I'm wearing. Sometimes I forget I'm wearing it in my office here, but I'm going to take that off and see my face. I legitimately forgot I had that on. So that's just getting used to that and too used to it around campus here. So anyways, today I want to just thank you for the work you've put in this quarter. I appreciate it. I know it's a tough year for everyone, whether you have suffered from the coronavirus or other illnesses or just being at home or lost jobs or all the things that have happened this year. It's been a tough year for people, and just know that I'm here for you in any way I can be. I know as a teacher, I'm limited in terms of what I can do for you, but just know that it weighs heavily on my mind and my hearts for all my students, for my players, for my colleagues. I generally wear other people's problems and pains on my shoulders. So I want you to keep working hard and know that I'm here to help you be successful and grind it out and just build resiliency, right? It's definitely okay to struggle and to feel the pain and the frustration and the heartache and the grief that comes along with this year. And I'm not just mean grief in terms of people's lives, but grief in terms of the loss of our everyday things that we took for granted or valued. That the limitations on what we're able to do right now it's very much grief is what a lot of people are dealing with, and it's very difficult. And so I want to be here to help you keep working hard and grinding through that and building that resiliency as we head into 2021 and as you take biology 242. Hopefully I want to continue to help you be successful in this course, but really build that toughness and resiliency to continue to work through. And I know that many of you are dealing with far more difficult circumstances than I am. I'm blessed with my wife and 3 kids that we've all been healthy, and we've been able to do things financially and different things because we've just been lucky in this situation, and not everybody has been. So I know that others have lost their jobs, or they have multiple kids at home, or they're a single parent with multiple kids at home, or you're doing homeschooling, or you're working and doing all that. So please know that while I may not be able to fully understand every situation, I definitely feel for all of you, and I definitely can understand grief. And my wife and I actually lost a baby 5 years ago now. We had a stillbirth. Isabel is her name, and so I definitely can understand the grief that people are dealing with in terms of just losing things and losing people. So please know that I come from a place of compassion and want you to be successful. So even though my course is hard and I demand high expectations out of people, I empathize with the path it takes to get there, and the grind and the toughness and the difficulties it takes to get to that success. So hopefully that's not sharing too much. I feel like we don't have a very personable setting online, right? And I love teaching online, but we don't have a personal setting where you and I get to sit down and have conversations or talk in class or share experiences. Some of you check in with me on Zoom or shoot me emails, and it's or put it in your assignments, and that's refreshing, where I get to learn more about you. But to me, the greatest part of, one, being a human, but 2, coaching and teaching is the people. And if I didn't have coaching and getting to see my athletes every day, this moment would be a lot harder for me, because I really relish and enjoy the time getting to know people and learning from people and learning about people. Because if there wasn't people, then these jobs are pointless, because it's really all about each other. And I just appreciate you. So even if I don't know you that well, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the work you're doing in this class. If it wasn't your willingness to educate yourself and get a career, I wouldn't have a job doing that. And so I thoroughly appreciate the fact that you're willing to get a career that requires this education, become a nurse or a dental hygienist to further better other people's lives and to care for other people. And so I take great pride and responsibility in my job to educate or provide an environment where you can educate yourself, where you can grow as a learner, grow as a future nurse or future dental hygienist or physical therapist or whatever you may be going into. Okay. All right. Enough about that. And let's dive into our lovely special senses. So I'm not going to talk about all of them. A couple things just to take note of with special senses is a lot of what's happening is something is binding to a receptor. And this is why I put it in the nervous system, because it's very much a nervous system thing. Something's binding to a receptor that's coming off of a specialized neuron. And then that's causing sodium to rush in, creating an action potential. And that's what these senses are. So for example, when I smell, right, my olfactory bulb, and I talked about this with the brain in the last video, comes out to here, and then there's specialized neurons that come down through the cribriform plate into my nose. And then there's these specialized receptors, kind of cilia receptors, that come off the neurons into my nasal cavities. So when I inhale air, things get caught in my nasal hair. Lovely, we're talking about nasal hair. But we have hair and fuzz in our nose, right? As much as we try to get rid of it, maybe, or not, depending on what you're going for. But I don't know why I went there with the nasal hair. Sorry. My wife always gets on me if my nasal hair is getting too long. So I'm lucky to have a wife that makes sure I look presentable. But when those molecules get stuck in the hair and then they bind to our receptors because they're moving around in there, because the cilia are moving and the molecules, that triggers a action potential response depending on what kind of molecule bound to what kind of receptor. And then that triggers a specific response back to our olfactory bulb, back to our brain, which processes the smell. And that's a huge part of our taste. If we didn't have our nose, our taste would be a lot different. And there's a new article out right now that talks about how COVID virus is actually damaging those receptor points there. That's causing part of the no taste, no smell symptom. If you're interested in that, let me know and I will shoot me an email and I'll share it with you. But that's a brand new article that just came out about possible causes for the no taste and no smell. So that's what's happening in most of our sensory mechanisms, is that something's binding to a receptor causing an action potential. And based on what molecule is binding to what receptor, that determines what kind of sensory information we're getting. Okay? And there's specific nervous system tracks to delineate. So when we look at the eye, the interesting thing about our vision is that, and there's a lot of interesting things about our vision, but when the message comes into our eye, it actually comes in flipped in multiple ways. So for example, when I'm looking at something, right, if I'm looking at it, the things above come down at an angle where it goes through my lens, which we'll talk about in a minute, the anatomy, goes through my lens and hits the bottom part of the back of my eye. So it comes down at an angle, and things below come up at this angle and hits up here. So that's when they talk about things coming in flipped on your eye, that's part of the reason, is because they're hitting your eye in the opposite spots. So things that are high are actually hitting the back low part of my eye. Things that are low are hitting the high part of my eye on the back. And therefore it comes in as a flipped image. Same thing right to left. If I'm looking at things on the left, it's going to come in and hit the right side, and vice versa, which is going to flip it horizontally. Luckily, our brain is intelligent and flips it so that we're not looking at a world upside down. Maybe we are. Who knows? We're seeing what we're seeing. But it flips the images for us. Okay, but they come in that way through our lens. So let's talk about the anatomy here. So back of the eye here, we have the optic nerve, okay, which we'll talk about on the inside because that creates a blind spot. Optic nerve comes in. We have our muscles, accessory muscles around the eye. We're not going to talk about those. Okay, but I'm going to open it up here. If I can, brand new model here. So let's see if I can get it open correctly. Just pulled this baby out of the box for you all today. All right. So let's look at it here. So the front right here, we have, I just knocked it off, our cornea. Okay. We have our cornea here. It's our protective layer. Right inside the cornea is a water-based solution called the aqueous humor that keeps our lens from drying out. Okay. And then around the lens, you have this iris, okay, that's attached to the ciliary body. And the iris and the ciliary body, it basically are a muscle that basically constrict and relax to create a different size pupil. The pupil is just a hole, right? That black thing in your eye is just a hole. And that determines how much light comes through, right? When it's really bright, we don't want as much light coming through because that's way too much stimulation. So we have a tighter pupil. When we are in a dark room, it gets wider to try to collect as much light as we can. Behind this iris, okay, first we have this giant thing back here, all right, and right in front of it is the lens. It's kind of hard to see. I'll talk about it in a minute. But this giant thing right here is the vitreous humor, which is like a jelly-like substance that helps hold pressure and structure in the eye. Okay, it's not as pure water as the one that's on behind the cornea. Okay, but it is more of a jelly-like structure. And if you cut a cow eye open, which we've done in person lab, it spills out in kind of a jelly area. This right here, okay, is your lens. Okay, a lens is really cool in person. This is kind of what it looks like, but it looks almost like it's really hard actually when you've taken it out of a cow eye and stuff. You can cut the layers all the way, but it's really, really hard. I'm going to set that over here. So now when we look inside the eye, okay, you can see the white on the outside is the sclera. Okay, the black layer on the inside here, you can't really see that well. I can show you the top part though, it has it. Okay, that's your choroid. Okay, and there's a lot of blood vessels that come in through that choroid to feed the retina, okay, and feed the eye. All right, so you actually have a lot of blood vessels in that choroid layer. Okay, and then on the inside layer, this orangish brown layer is your retina, and your retina is your layer that has all your rods and cones. Okay, and your cones are what are going to allow you to see color because they are able to absorb different wavelengths, and rods are not color oriented, but they help with the visual acuity, your ability to see things. Okay, they're just not color related to vision. All right, now again, these rods and cones are specialized sensory receptors basically, that when light comes through and hits the retina on the back, it interacts interacts with the photon, the wavelength, interacts with the pigment and the discs inside of the rods and cones. Okay, we're not going to get into all the reaction that occurs, but when that happens, the interaction that occurs then sends a signal through these neurons, and there's multiple layers of neurons in the retina that then goes to the optic nerve. And so, for example, when it comes through and hits in here on the retina, it actually interacts with those, and then it comes backwards to the best way to describe this is on the back layer of the retina, not the choroid or the sclera, but the back layer of the retina is where those rods and cones sit. Okay, and then it sends that message to the actual neurons, okay, that then connect to the optic disc, okay, or the optic nerve right here. And so this is your optic nerve, okay, and the optic nerve is the blind spot because there's no, this doesn't show it very well because it's cut in half, but right here there would be no rods or cones because the optic nerves come in. So that's what they call the blind spot. Over here, and this one kind of has, it's like right in here, and it's like the direct axis with the middle of the lens, okay, is your fovea centralis, which is one of your like sharpest, it's your sharpest point of vision where you can see with most clarity. Not necessarily color, but with most clarity, and that's your fovea centralis. It has a really high concentration of rods in that area, okay? So that's the inside of the eye, special senses, okay? Make sure you take a look at the videos I shared, all right? When you do it in person, if you ever come in the lab, I'm going to try to have next quarter in 242, we're going to have some days set aside where you can come in and see the models and syndavers and cadavers. We can show you some of the cool stuff on the eyes especially when you look at like a cow eye, it has the suspensory ligaments that come off of the ciliary body and attach to the lens. And that's pretty cool too, because the lens can be shaped a little bit to impact the refraction of the light, depending on if we're looking close or further away. So it's really helpful in terms of focusing on images. But pretty awesome stuff that our eyeballs are able to do that. And then also realize our optic nerves go to the opposite sides of our brain. So like when we see all this stuff from our right, it actually shifts and goes to the left hemisphere, and the right stuff goes to the right hemisphere, back towards this temporal lobe area. So very interesting how our brain works and how we process that information. The other thing we can look at here is the ear. One of the other uniquely important, if I can get my tympanic membrane to get in here. All right, is the ear. So we have this, our outside, what we think of as the ear, okay, what's called the pinna or the auricle, okay, this outside cartilage area. And then on the inside, right, so we have the external ear, and then we have middle and inner ear, okay? So in the middle ear here, we have our tympanic membrane, and this is where the sound waves come in and they hit this tympanic membrane, okay? And when this tympanic membrane gets hit, it causes these ossicles, which are the middle ear bones, okay? And they're the tiniest bones in your body, and it's really amazing to see these things in person because they are tiny. I mean, think about how small this is, and this is a giant ear, right? No one's ear is this big, right? Whether you think your sister or brother has big ears, no one's ears are this big. So these ossicles actually shake, or what we would call oscillate, which is why we call them ossicles. So these bones oscillate, and when it does that, it sends that vibration, right, into the oval window here, and then that causes the fluid inside of what we call the cochlea. All right, so I'm going to pull this out. This is in the inner ear. The cochlea, the snail shell, there's fluid in there. It causes the vibrations to move through the fluid. When it does that, there are hair cells on what we call the organ of Corti that move. And when these hair cells get moving, the hair, the cilia-like projections that come up, rub against a tectorial membrane, okay? And that's what triggers the action potential that then goes down the vestibular cochlear nerve here, this yellow thing, to our brain. The hair cells are on this frequency range. So depending on what part of the hair cells you hit, sends different levels of frequencies to our brain in telling us basically how loud and what type of sound it is, right? Because how loud it is going to determine how much those hair cells move. And so based on how much those hair cells move, certain hair cells will touch and certain won't. So that helps differentiate the frequency and the types of sounds. Okay, seeing things also helps us understand, and remembering and knowing, right? Learning as a kid, that cognitive behavioral learning helps us understand sounds as well. Right? We start to learn what those sounds are because when we're a kid, we hear the sound and we're like, "What's that?" And someone tells us what it is, or we see what it is, and now then you start to have that stored memory of what those sounds are. So it's not that our ear tells us, "Oh, that's a bird," right? It tells us, it helps us hear the sound. And then our brain processes what that is based on all the other environmental information that tells us. So it's important to understand that. The other part that's important about our ear is balance. And there's different types of kind of gravitational balance that this helps us with. But these semicircular canals, okay, help us with balance. So the inner ear is a big part of balance, and pressure from our sinuses can impact that. They can come back up the auditory canal or eustachian tube from our basically from our pharynx back up to our ear, and that can cause pressure that can cause imbalance. But a lot of people have inner ear problems, right? They have balance issues. They have vertigo, right? Or they might get really dizzy if they stay down and then stand up all of a sudden, okay? So that's the main gist of the hearing that you need to know, okay? So sound waves hit the tympanic membrane, oscillate the bones, the lymph fluid inside of the cochlea vibrates, causes the hair cells to move, touch the tectorial membrane, action potential, sodium rushes in when that happens, sends a message down the vestibulocochlear nerve to the brain. We process that information, okay? You have your external ear, okay? And you call this hole the external acoustic meatus, sometimes auditory. And then a lot of times they don't use auditory until certain areas, but they're interchangeable, acoustic and auditory. Hits the tympanic membrane, right? Middle ear right here, inner ear, all right? Very important for hearing. So when you think about your assignments this week, when we look at the screen here, we have the videos on watching these different types of senses and learning about it. Hopefully you watch those or already have. You're going to complete an activity on special senses it's just an online simulation that'll help you. And then we have the special senses lab activity that is kind of a quiz, but it's just to help work through the anatomy and physiology of some of the special senses. You have the special senses case study disorder that's very helpful. And then your end of module nervous system assessment includes everything from a nervous system. So when you're answering those cases, don't be super quick. Understand that, like, if I'm sitting in a chair and something loud occurs, how do I know that that loud thing occurred? What had to happen in my ear, right? If I smell something on my bike riding to a grandma's house and I know she makes really good pies, but I smell it, how did I smell it? Right? So make sure you're explaining all of the physiology that's occurring in these situations, okay? I don't want quick, brief answers. Not that I want 7,000 pages for each one, but I want you to thoroughly explain what's happening in their nervous system in those moments. And if it's a problem, which one of them is, explain what's going wrong. All right? Hopefully this was helpful. Make sure you go through all the material in week 11. You don't have a cumulative final. The end of module nervous system assessment is your last thing to do. It's due Monday. If you have anything late that you need to turn in, please have it in by Tuesday. I'll post an announcement. Tuesday the 8th, because I need to have everything graded and get those grades turned back around. And the end of module nervous system assessment will take me a while for this one because there's a lot to it. So it's going to take me a few days or 4 days to get all that graded, because it's hard to grade a bunch in a row, because if I grade too many in a row, I start, your grading kind of changes, so it's good to take breaks. So anyways, please reach out to me if you need help. Finish this quarter strong, and hopefully I will see you in the winter quarter. If you haven't registered for your classes yet for winter quarter, get registered now. Get in your classes you need. Email me if you need help figuring that out. If you can't get a hold of an advisor, shoot me an email. We can Zoom. We can talk on the phone and figure it out. Make sure you know the classes you need to take. All right, or I can help get you in touch with whoever your advisor is. All right, take care and have a wonderful rest of your week, and I look forward to hearing from you.